Hello everyone, it's Mrs. Gorman. I'm going to go through the steps for creating a proportion guide for your fashion figures that you may or maybe need to make at home because you didn't bring yours home from school, which I totally would understand that. It's probably with your sketchbook back at school. So what I have here in front of me is just a piece of regular copy paper or printer paper. It's totally fine to use that for this, and I've got a regular ruler and just a pencil, and I'm going to start with drawing that line down the middle of the page. So I'm going to go from 0 all the way down to 9, because if you remember, our exaggerated figure forms are 9 heads tall. So we're going to make a mark at each of the inch marks, because that's going to mark each of the heads of the figure. And I'm going to be drawing horizontal lines at each of those spots. So I've got my vertical line drawn and I have a mark at each inch. I'm going to draw the horizontal lines next. I'm probably just going to draw a couple, and then I'm going to pause the video and I'll come back to show you once I have them all drawn. So of course you want to draw a horizontal mark. Try to keep them nice and parallel at each one of the inch marks as you go down the sheet. I'm going to finish that up and I'll be right back. All right, so I've drawn all my lines down the center line here. I've also marked the heads so that I have 9 heads tall figure. As you remember, the top entire segment is just the head, so that's where we have our first mark. Now, about 1/3 of the way in the second one, I'm going to make a small mark there, and if you want to make a dotted line all the way out to the edge, this is the neck. So you can mark that as the neck. This line here is going to be the apex, and that is the fullest part around the chest. We're going to go down to into this space here. We've got at the bottom third, which is going to be about right here. Take those marks all the way out to the edge. This is your elbow. And this line that's already here between 3 and 4 is the waist. So again, in this next space, we have slightly lower than halfway. So here's halfway, a little bit slightly lower than halfway, all the way out to this edge here. This is going to be the hip. And this solid line between 4 and 5 is the groin. And then at a little lower than halfway between on segment number 5, here's halfway, slightly lower. Again, we're going to go all the way out to the side. This is going to be your hand. This would be where the fingertips would fall. This next solid line is the thigh. The next line down that's solid is the knee. The next line down is the calf. And then we have the ankle. And then the very bottom is the floor. And that would end up being where the tip of the shoes would be. All right, so now that we have this in place, you can use a marker, or if you want to darken it with a heavier pencil, like your ebony pencil, if you have that at home. If not, find a thin tip marker and you can trace over those lines. And then you can place that underneath any paper that you have to be able to draw on top of it. So from that, you can work with any of your designs that are in the assignments that are coming. So let's say from here that I decide that, okay, this is going to be the way that I want to work with my figure. If you remember, when we were working with our figure in class, we had the waist was already determined by an oval. So you can make the oval for the waist. And again, it should be about the width of the head, maybe a little bit wider, of course, but it's squattier. So you can place your waist shape there. And then between the head and the neck space, you'll want to make sure that you add your neck. And typically the width of the neck should come down from the outside of the eyeball. So if you imagine eyeballs on there, the outside line of the eyeball is where how wide the neck is. Now the shoulder area, if you remember from the shoulder, that is supposed to be about a head and a half wide, and we don't want it straight across. You want it to slightly taper down. So if you look at the head shape, it's if you look at just the shoulder line, it's going to be about a head and a half wide. From there, we can place the shoulder joint right underneath, and we can start to taper to the waist from that shoulder line. Now if we draw an imaginary line down from the shoulder line, that's where the hip is going to be. So we're going to come down from there, and that's how we can get the width of the hip, and that goes straight down to the groin. And from there we can take our shape for the knee. So on each of the knee line, we're going to place a circle on each side. We're going to go from the groin and hip area down to the knee. And then we're going to make a circle at the ankle, which is of course smaller. And we can draw from the knee down to the ankle. Remember, you want to have the fuller part of the calf at up above where this line is, not down below. Want to make sure your ankle is narrower than your calf. And then lastly is the foot. So if you want to create sort of a shape for the foot there, even kind of like a, I don't know what kind of shape you would call that, but anyway, like a swimming flipper, that works. Now for the arms, we've got the elbows at this dotted line, so we're going to draw our smaller circle at the elbow line, and we're going to be drawing from the shoulder to the elbow. And then at the groin, we also have the wrist, which isn't marked, but right at the groin we also have the wrist. So again, we have the forearm, usually tapers a little bit wider at the top to narrower at the wrist. And then we have our hands that can be placed. And again, they can be almost like a mitten. We've done that before. Okay, so there's basically the whole figure. Now, when you go to place your plain white copy paper over the top so that you can see your figure from beneath and draw your designs, you can work right from that, and you don't have to put those circles in place. You can simply just use the figure that's there, just as if you had your croquis with you at home. So you don't have to draw all the circle shapes. You can simply just create your figure. Of course, then comes the fun part of designing clothing for your form. Now, if you want to make your figure be in a more interesting position than straightforward, by all means, please position your figure in some fun position. That would be great. But if you're fine doing it with a plain figure, that's okay too. The most important part is that you have the figure shape that you need to be able to do some of the exercises that are in your folder for our remaining time for the school year. Now, hopefully, we will all be back together, but I know the president has requested us all to stay at home and reduce contact until April, or the end of April at this point. So it's looking less likely that we'll be doing that. So once you have your figure in place, then of course you can start to design fashion to fit your form. So that should help you out, get through that part. But again, make sure that you are working with your scale here so that you get proper human proportion before you start your designs.